Engineer producer great Bill Schnee on working on the last Dire Straits album, The Good and the Bad. I'm John Bowden from Rock History Music. What was it like you were engineer on the last Dire Straits album?
Yeah, that's a long story. You said you don't mind long stories, right?
Don't mind at all.
Okay. So I had mixed four or five records with Mark that he produced, different things. And a couple of movie soundtracks and his pub band, the Notting Hillbillies, something that he really loved. They literally were his pub buddies in England. And we were mixing an album in my studio, the only one we mixed in my studio, because it was analog, which at that time I was still in favor of over digital. And it was analog. It was the duet album with Chet Atkins, Neck and Neck. And he it was analog because Chet only had an analog machine, and some of it was done in his home studio in Nashville. And so that's why. And so we're mixing that album, which I think is a great album. Another thing I loved about that is that when we mixed in England, he always brought food in. He never wanted to go out. And so here we were in my studio, and he said, should we bring something in? And I said, or we could go out. I would love to go out. So, oh, okay. So we started going out to lunch, which I really like. I like to get away from the whole building and see humanity in action before you go back in and concentrate so much. And as we're walking in the restaurant, Mark says to me, Bill, I'm going to do another Dire Straits album. Oh, really? That's great. He said, yes, and I'd like you to do it with me. I went, really? What about Neil Dorfsman? He said, Bill, I want you to do it. And why I'm not using Neil is none of your concern. I went, okay, I would love to. And so we sat down at lunch, and he started saying, we'll be doing it in England. It's going to take, at least 6-8 months probably. I'm going to ask Jeff Porcaro to play drums on it. I went, oh boy, now everything I could ask for, including my favorite drummer. So I came home and went to my wife, Sally, and said, you're not going to believe this, Sally. Mark asked me to do the next Dire Straits album. And she went, oh, that's great. I said, yeah, we're going to do it in England. And it's going to take, maybe 6 to 9 months. And just then one of our young boys came bounding in, laughing or something. And as I looked at him, I went, oh, I have 2 young children. I can't leave her for 6 to 9 months. I have a studio to run. Wait a minute, how's this going to work? So I called his manager the next day, and I said, here, we have a little bit of a problem. I've thought about it, and the only thing that will work is I have to, as far as the kids and wife go, we have to all move to England. We have to get a flat and live in England. And then I have to figure out who can run the studio. I said, so the only thing that will make sense for me to do this is to co-produce it with him, either in name or in points on the back end. And he said, okay, let me talk to Mark. And so the next day he called me and he said, Mark really wants you to do it. Oh, great. He said, but he's not going to have you co-produce it. And I said, well, then I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I can't do it to my wife and whatnot. It doesn't make sense. So that was that. And I was very sad. The next day he calls back again and he said, I had a different idea. I said, what's that? He said, why don't you come and do the tracks? Mark only knows you as a mixing engineer. You show him, what your involvement as a producer might be, and he might change his mind. And I said, that makes sense. He said, that shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 weeks to get the tracks. So let's do that. So, okay. So that's what I did. I went to England and we recorded at the old Air Studios on Oxford Circus, the big room. And we spent the first day just getting everybody happy with the headphones and the sounds and whatnot. And those were the days, those big budget albums where you spend a day just setting up and wonderful stuff. And so the next day we got started and we got the first track. And the next morning we came in and he listened back to what we had done. And we started on the next song, and we just took a break. We didn't have it quite yet. And we went up to the the break room, which it's so civilized there. We had our proper cuppa, that would be cup of tea with cup and saucer and biscuit. And we're standing there, and Mark comes up to me and he says, "Bill, it sounds really incredible." I went, "Thanks, Mark." He said, "I really want you to finish this album with me." And I went, "I really do too, Mark." And I knew what he was saying, and I think he knew what I was saying. Anyway, that happened again about another 10 days later or something, and it was the same thing. I really do too, Mark. And then the last day we finished, and where everyone was saying goodbye, and he came up to me, and I told him, I said, you've got a great album here, no surprise. But what is a surprise is that you don't have anything like Money for Nothing. And I think your fans, might be looking for something like, you might think about writing one more song. And he said, "I'll give it a think." And so I went home and I waited, and he said, "We're going to take a week break." And it was, "We're going to take a week break, Bill, and I hope you come back and finish it with me." And I went, "I do too, Mark." Well, about 3 days into the week, the manager called me and said, "He's not changing his mind." It was the same line. "He really wants you to come back and finish it, but he's not going to change his mind." And I said, "I'm very sorry to say I can't do it." So I just figured that was it. And he would call me to come over and mix it. So I don't know how many months in, quite a few months later, he called me and said, "I'm coming to LA to do the background vocals, and I'd like you to do them with me." And okay. And he came, and we did the background vocals. Everything seemed fine. And he went back to England, and I was going, waiting and waiting and waiting, and he never called. Next thing I know, it's obvious he's finished the album. Why? Because there's a world tour for it. The album has come out and there's a world tour. And when he came to LA, he called me when I got to LA, and he said, "Bill, I want to thank you for doing my two favorite albums, the Pub Band and this one." And I went, "Thanks, Mark. It means a lot to me." And Neil Dorsman mixed it. So I don't know, I don't know what to say about that. And I thought, doggone, was he punishing me for not letting him have his way? I don't understand. Anyway, that was it. And then he ended up moving to Nashville, and they brought the steel guitar player he had brought over for that album, suggested an engineer from Nashville that came over and finished the overdubs with him, and he got Neil Dorsman to mix it. And so he subsequently bought a house in Nashville and made a lot of records in Nashville and so on and so forth. And, I just had totally lost touch with him. And then one of the old Lemons and Lemonade came true when I was writing my book, because I bought a brand new laptop that I'm speaking to you on. 6 months into writing, of all things, the solid state drive went bad. Well, no, everything was backed up on the cloud, so that's not a problem. And I've checked, and the cloud hadn't been backed up for 6 months. So from the beginning, I had none of it on the cloud. But being that I work with computers every day now, I knew to back it up on more than one thing. Yeah. So I obviously had a thumb drive with everything backed up. Unfortunately, I had been tardy and hadn't backed that up in about 6-8 weeks. So I tried to get, I sent the solid state drive off to one of those recovery places, and they don't have very good luck with solid states. So anyway, I just grinned and bared it, and I had to go back and cover what I had written and lost. And it started with the Mark Knopfler chapter. So I got online, as I often did, to get dates and places and stuff. And what popped up right away was Mark was coming to LA on a tour, a US tour. And I went, knowing the whole story that I've just told, and I went, doggone it, I want to know what's going on. So I got word to him that I'd like to meet with him when he's in LA. He wrote me a beautiful email back that he would love to, and just loving email. And so when he got to LA, we had set it up. I went to his hotel, which was at the beach, and we sat down, had breakfast, and it was, as often those things would happen, I suppose. He looked a bit older. I'm sure I looked the same. And He was just as gracious a man as he always was, and I didn't want to spoil the moment, so I didn't ask him. I'm just curious. The album came out great, and it was mixed beautifully. I'm very happy with how everything I did sounds. Why didn't you call me to mix it? I didn't have the guts to do it. But we had a great breakfast. We talked about everything from soup to his car racing. And then he got us seats for his concert that night, beautiful seats. He did an incredible show, as he always did. I went to the tour, the very first tour that they did in America. And with Boz, I was working with Boz at the time. We went in San Francisco. We went to hear him then. And anyway, he did a great tour. And then he doesn't like backstage as much as I don't like backstage get-togethers. So he just had which was wonderful, a little intimate get-together for 10 people, 12 people at his hotel. So it was great because I went and hung out. My wife and a middle son went out and we hung out with them doing that. And it was just lovely, lovely time. And he's just, everything is wonderful. When I wrote the book, I sent it to him for a review, which he did give me, a beautiful review of the book. And so what can I say? Just one of those people, I think I said it in the book, there have been several that if you met him, you'd never know he sang in front of tens of thousands of people with people screaming and applauding like crazy. He's just like the guy next door.
I want to thank Bill Schnee for talking to me. We talked for quite a long time. That's why this series is really long. Before I had a chance to interview Bill, I asked, is he interviewing anybody else that day? I'd like him fresh. If there's any possibility, I can have the only interview of the day because he's so important to me. Now, in the 70s, I knew who he was. I was growing up and I was watching his name on the back of the album covers. Back then, I called him Bill Schnee, but it was the time before the internet, so I didn't know. When I got into radio, I was quickly corrected on that. Bill, I want to thank you for spending time with us. What an amazing series. It meant so much to me. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. And of course, like our videos. It helps the standing of every one of our videos if you like them. If you want to donate to the channel, there's a link at the very top of the description. If you want to order Chairman of the Board, Bill Schnee's book, there's links in the description as well. I'm John Beaudin. Take good care of yourself.